Gentlemen of F.U.E.L, thanks for being here today. I'm honored to introduce Pastor Tim McClure. He's my friend, he's from a wonderful family, and he's got a beautiful church family at Promised Land Church in Melbourne. Tim McClure.
Thank you, thank you. Well, thank you once again. A little deja vu, but hey, we're doing good. Coming here and to speak to you when I was asked to, I never take an opportunity to speak to someone lightly, whether it's two people, one person, or a massive congregation or a building full of people. I always take it very seriously, and when Brian asked me to come speak, and I agreed to, I began to pray and say, "Hey God, what's something that I can say that may inspire, help, motivate, whatever it may be?" And a couple Sundays ago, I actually spoke on this topic, but this has just been in my heart for some time, and I want to talk about a principle for the next little bit that is a key principle to your spirituality. It's a key principle to your relationship at home. It's a key principle that affects your job, your career, whatever aspect. This really impacts almost every single aspect of your life. But before I tell you what it is, I'm going to tell you what it's not. It's not based on your appearance, and we all say thank goodness for that. It's not based on your background. It's not based on your education. It's not based on your friends. It's not based on the type of car you drive or where you live or what kind of house you live in. This quality has the power to impact every single thing in your life. And what this is consistency. And maybe you've noticed in life, in the world around us, how inconsistent, or I'll put it this way, how consistently people are inconsistent. That, it's people at work, they show up and they don't show up consistently on time. It seems like relationships are not consistent. It seems like so many things lack consistency in our life. And however, this being consistent, like I said, has the potential to impact every single thing in your life. And so many people are inconsistent in what they eat, how they eat, where they go. They're inconsistent. If somebody says, "Hey, I want to lose weight and I want to this, that," but they know what to do, but they're not consistent in it. And I'm not just going to talk to you about, you got to be consistent, but one of the things I will do here in a minute is I want to give you a few keys to help you become more consistent, because regardless of how consistent you are in many aspects of your life, we all have something in our life that we know we need to be more consistent in that we're not. And I don't know the normal format here, but let's just we're all kind of together, be real for a little bit, a bunch of men. I don't know about you, but I don't have nothing to prove. How many has struggled with consistency in something in your life, and then it starts impacting other areas of your life? It starts making it, your inconsistency here begins to cause problems over here. And you might not be consistent with things maybe your wife has asked you to do and you haven't done them consistently. Well, we all know if that's the case, then it starts impacting a lot of areas of your life. But so often we find ourselves in this place, but in Romans verse 7, or chapter 7, verse 15, I find this personally encouraging, because I find that the great Apostle Paul, the one that wrote the majority of the New Testament, the one that we look at and say, wow, look at what he's done, wow, and we admire him, he ends up saying this. He says, I do not really understand myself. How many's ever said something like that? I don't get it. I don't understand myself. But he ends up saying, he says, I don't really understand myself. For I want to do what is right, but I don't do it. Instead, I do what I hate. And I know that nothing good lives in me. That is, in my sinful nature. I want to do what's right, but I can't. I want to do what is good, but I don't. I don't want to do what's wrong, but I do it anyways. Now, see, reading this actually encourages me, because if the great, mighty, powerful Apostle Paul looks at this and he says something like this, then it makes me feel a little better about myself. You know, I look at it and I'm like, okay, so if this great Apostle Paul that Christ come and, you know, knocks him off his horse, blinds him, and he recruits him personally, and, you know, and does all this theatrics, so to speak, to get him to come to do and to help launch the church. If he is struggling, as a matter of fact, in this same passage, Paul ends up saying, he says, who will deliver me from this wretched man that I am? So whether it helps you or not a little bit, I know it always helps me. And in this, in order to become more consistent in life, in whatever that thing in your life is, you have to pre-decide before you're inconsistent again. You have to make a decision beforehand that I am going to be consistent in this. Now, that's easy to say. But let me ask a question, and I like feedback, so if you've got something to say, you know, we can have a conversation. But let me ask you something. Why does consistency matter? Anybody?
I think it builds trust.
Okay, yeah, absolutely it builds trust.
You believe someone happens again.
Okay, yeah. See, some people you've learned not to trust because they're consistently untrustworthy. But we're talking about consistency in a positive way, or things we know we should and do. But yes, absolutely. When you're consistent in something, it builds trust. Is there any, yeah?
It's hard to be productive without consistency.
Absolutely. It's very difficult to be productive without consistency. So if you go into your job, go into a workplace, and you don't consistently do what you're supposed to do, things don't get done. How many's ever had like 100 projects, it feels like, maybe not literally, but a ton of projects going on, and you're working on all of them, but you didn't stay consistent on one, and it feels like nothing's getting done, right? You know, and I teach people, like, look, focus on one, get a task done, then go to the next, because that will build momentum. Yeah?
I think when you talk about consistency, I think about someone who says they're a Bible believer, whether you're in the ministry or not, and you're basing what you believe on the Word of God.
Correct.
And not on your emotions or what you've been spoon-fed. Because how often have we taught ourselves that others teaching something that's not even in the Scriptures?
Right. You're
And then defending that.
correct. Absolutely. Because, I mean, everyone here, we're Christian men. And here's a major, huge, massive point of this whole topic, is you cannot be a true, successful Christian, biblically, without consistency.
I think it's the basis of your integrity is your consistency.
Absolutely. It is. It really is. It is the basis of the integrity that you have. Because if you don't have consistency, then people will say, well, he doesn't have integrity. Because you don't follow through. You're not doing what you said you were going to do. See, here's the thing about consistency. And one of the reasons it is so critical and reason it matters is because successful people, whether it's a successful Christian or a successful business person or a successful husband or a successful father, whatever it is, a successful person will do consistently what others may do occasionally. A successful person does consistently what others will do occasionally. People say, oh, well, I do that, but maybe not consistently. But it is the husband that shows up consistently to his wife, that supports consistently, that works on himself consistently, that puts energy into the relationship consistently. It is a Christian that consistently prays. That is consistently praying, not occasionally praying. Because if you're human like me, yes, I'm a pastor. Yes, I've dedicated my life to ministering, to helping people, and to serving God. But if you're human like me, you'll find yourself sometimes go a few days and you're like, oh, man, I hadn't prayed. And then you're like scrambling and trying to go pray. Or if you're not careful, maybe a week or a month goes by, and then you get out of the habit of, or the consistency of, and then all of a sudden you recognize your spirituality begins to digress, and you're like, what's going on? Then what happens is you realize, I've not been consistent in this, or I've not been consistent in a Bible study or my devotional time. I've not been consistent in prayer time. I've not been consistent in going to church. You can always bring it back to your consistency. And this is why I led up from the very beginning that this is something that impacts every part of our life, including our spirituality. I want to point out real fast, and I'm not, for the sake of time and all that, I'm not going to really read the passage and go through it all, but I believe everyone here probably knows the story of Daniel. And basically, somewhere around 605 BC, Babylon came in and conquered Jerusalem. And they took all the young, good, smart, successful, talented young men, and then they put them into their society, into the business, and begin to, for lack of a better way to put it, brainwash them, start putting them into their culture, have them eat their foods, talk to them about their gods, and all of this stuff to bring them into their culture, because it helped simulate the people into their culture, and it also helped Babylon to gain knowledge from the other societies. And Daniel was one of these young men that was brought in. And he had such an impact of his consistency in his own life and the way he lived. You know the story, how Darius come and said, hey, this is how you're going to eat. They said, this is what you're going to do. And Daniel says, no, that's not what I'm going to do. This is what I'm going to do. And they got upset and they were going to force him. He says, well, just give us for this amount of time to do this. If we're not better off, more healthy than the rest of them, then we'll go your way. But if we're better off, then let us do what we do, because we're better. So they did, and it worked. But Darius ended up seeing something in Daniel that was unique. And he says, hey, man, this guy's got ability. I'm going to promote this guy. I'm going to use this guy. Well, the other people around didn't really like it. And so they conspired against Daniel to have him killed. So now the Bible tells us something. It's in Daniel 6. And it actually says, I'm going to just read this one part because it's very important. Daniel 6. And it says, then the other administrators and high officials began searching for some fault in the way Daniel was handling government affairs, but they could not find anything to criticize or condemn. He was faithful, always responsible, and completely trustworthy. Wow. That right there is powerful. It says that he was faithful, always responsible, and completely trustworthy. They couldn't find fault in him. So what they did, as you know the story, they said, well, let's use his belief and his God against him. So they go to Darius and says, hey man, let's make a decree that if anyone worships any God but you, or prays to any God but you over the next 30 days, we're going to throw him in a lion's den. And they kind of stroked his ego And they said, you're the GOAT. You're the best. Man, you got great. Look at those shoes, are great. And he's like, yeah, my shoes are nice, I am the GOAT. Yeah, I am the best. And they kind of stroke his ego. So he signs this decree. And then guess what Daniel does? You all know.
What he always does.
What he always does. He stayed consistent regardless of the situation. He was consistent, didn't matter what outside things demanded of him. He was still consistent in what he knew he had to do. And matter of fact, in verse 10, Daniel 6, verse 10, it tells us, but when Daniel learned, so he knew this, so when Daniel learned that this law had been signed, when he went home, he knelt down as usual in his upstairs room with his window open towards Jerusalem, and he prayed 3 times a day, just as he had always done, giving thanks to his God. They knew he was going to be consistent because he always was. So therefore he was. And guess what happened to him? They threw him in the lion's den. Too many of us, and I say us, I'm not just speaking of this room, I'm talking about Christians, and let's get even more specific. Too many of us Christian men, we try to become consistent when something goes wrong. Right? Let's just be real for a few minutes. Yeah, because we want to fix it. So when things start happening, we say, hold on a minute, I got to get real consistent. I got to start praying. I got to start going to church. I got to start doing this. And we get real consistent. You know what happened when Daniel got thrown in the lion's den? The Bible says this. It says that God sent angels and they held the mouth of the lions, they held their mouths shut. The Bible never says that Daniel started praying when he was in the lion's den. But we know he prayed consistently before he was ever in the lion's den. See, our prayers and the things we do, consistency in life, is what ends up protecting us in the hardship of our life. See, if you're consistent with business, when something falls and something happens and everyone knows you're consistent, when something goes wrong, people are not going to be like, some people will, don't misunderstand, but there'll be certain people that will still stand with you even in a low place in business because they know you're consistent, therefore they know you'll come through it instead of trying to become consistent in the problem. If you have an issue at home or you did something stupid, which us men, we have a tendency of doing that, and your wife gets upset, but because of your consistency in life, it becomes much easier to overcome this hurdle. Now, I don't want to just leave you and tell you have to be consistent without leaving you with something. The way I put it is I like to teach and leave handles on it. Something you can take with you, something you can hold on to, something you can use. So in order to be consistent, I'm going to give you 3 keys, 3 things to do to help you be more consistent in the things that you know. Whether it's prayer, whether it's at home, whether maybe it's being a father and being a better father, or being with your kids, or mending a relationship, or maybe it's at work, or maybe it's how you handle money. Whatever it may be, whatever your thing is in your life that you need more consistency in. There are 3 things. You're going to start with a why. You're going to plan to fail, and I know that sounds almost counterintuitive, but I'll explain it to you. And fall in love with the process. You plan to fail, or first you start with a why. See, the thing is if you don't have a real why, and you don't know what it is, when things get hard, you may stop. I'm not talking just simply about, let's look at this. Daniel, he was consistent. He was devoted to God. See, some people have a desire or something they want, and so they go after it. But when it gets difficult, they are no longer consistent in it. But they are not devoted to it. But when you have a huge why in your life, like for instance, someone says, well, I need to stop smoking. Have you ever noticed that, and I have found recently, most people don't even create New Year's resolutions anymore? Does anybody still create New Year's resolutions in your life? Okay. One. And I'm not picking on you, but probably the youngest one in the room. You know what the reason why I find most people don't do New Year's resolutions anymore? They failed at it so many times. But have you ever noticed that, let's just do it this way. They say, you know what? I'm going to lose 20 pounds and I'm going to eat much better and I'm going to start January 1st. So I've got a few months ahead before then, so I'm going to eat every single thing I can until January 1st. Okay? But you know what that tells me? That really losing that weight and getting in shape, you don't have a real why. Because you're waiting till then to do it. But if it was serious and it was real and legitimate, you wouldn't wait till then, you'll do it now. But we push it out. Let me put it this way. If a doctor says you know what? If you don't stop smoking, you're going to die. Okay, doctor, I get it. I will. January 1st, I'll stop. And doctor will be like, what do you mean? Didn't you just hear what I said? You're going to die. Well, yeah, I got it, but January 1st. We would think that's silly. But the thing is the person starts working on it right now because his why is to live. That's big. So he becomes devoted to life, to living. The problem is that too many people, they want something, but they don't have a true why. It's not something that creates a devotion. You have a desire. You might not have a why that pulls or forces devotion. Pedro, appreciate you, man. It was nice meeting you. Absolutely. So you must have a why. You must create a why that creates devotion within you. It's got to be something that sparks emotion, sparks desire. I met a young man this past week that just had a child. And he is now working 3 jobs. And he says, I think I'm going to stop working the 3rd job because I want to spend more time with my daughter, his little kid. And we're talking about it. And he's like, yeah, but I want all this too. And I said, you got to put into focus what's important. And I said, why are you going to work and doing so much work? For my daughter. Okay, but don't do so much that you miss her life. Yes, you got a big why you need to do something. And that's a massive motivator, is kids. It's like, hey, I got to go I got to work, But you have to have a why, because if you don't, your devotion lacks. Why do you want to get closer to God? And you might say, because it's the right thing to do. That's what I'm supposed to do as a Christian. Well, that's not a real why. Because that's not going to motivate you to get up a little bit early to pray. That's not going to motivate you to, you're having a rough day and then, I gotta go to church, or I gotta go do this, or I gotta go do that, or, I gotta spend time praying, with my family or this. No, your why might be because I'm sick and tired of the devil distracting me from what God has called me to do. I know I have purpose. I know there's something bigger in my life. And I'm sick of the devil messing with me. So therefore, I'm going to go and I'm going to do this. And then it begins to motivate you. You say, well, I want a better marriage. Why? Because my spouse is a jerk, and if I don't, if I don't do it. No, that's not going to do it. But if you say, because I want to honor God, showing my kids what it means and looks like to have a father, a God-fearing father in their life, to break generational curses so that my kids grow up understanding what a real man, a real father looks like. That'll motivate you a little bit when you don't feel like doing it. Because when you don't feel like doing it and you start going and you remember your why, wait a minute, my kids might see this. That'll help you. The next thing is plan to fail. See, none of us are perfect. You think that Daniel prayed every single day and never missed a prayer? You think that Daniel never missed a prayer? I would venture to say he probably did. And the reason I say that is because he was human. And he lived in a real world. And he had a real job. And he had an emperor that if he got mad, he could kill him. So he had real responsibilities. And I would venture to say that, yes, he probably did miss a day or two or more. And the problem is this, and the reason I say plan to fail is because so many people have an all or nothing mentality. That it's, I do perfect and I pray every day, or why do it? It's an all or nothing mentality. I serve God perfectly, or why should I even try? And the thing is if you plan to fail, meaning that you know you're going to miss a day, you know you're going to mess up, you know that you're going to have an issue and it's not going to work out right. You understand that. Once you understand that, then you make a plan. When I miss this, what do I do? What I tell people is if you miss a day, if you miss one, don't miss two. I'm not going to beat you up because you messed up. No, just, try not to. And some people talk about juggling life or the balance of life. I tell people it's closer to a juggling act because you've got so many things going on and you've got so many things in the air. And what I tell people is if you drop the ball for your wife because of work, and you've got to accomplish this at work, and you drop the ball and you don't do something your wife's asked, or you miss an appointment with your wife, the next time around you can't drop that ball again. You can't keep dropping the same ball. If you drop the ball at work, next time around you can't drop that one again. So if you miss one, understand you're going to mess up. Guess what? You're going to miss a Bible study. You're going to miss a prayer time. You're going to miss a birth date. You're going to miss a wedding anniversary. You're going to miss something. And you're like, oh no, and you're freaking out, running around trying to do. But if you miss one, don't miss two. Just plan and understand. I will make a mistake. And do you understand that failure is not final? It's simply feedback. When you fail, it's life, it's work, it's relationship. It's giving you feedback of what did not work. It's not final. It's not there to hurt you. It's there to help you. How many's ever had success without failure? No one. Ever. You know why? Because failure is a main ingredient to success. You learn more from your failures than you do your successes. Yeah. So plan, understand understand you're not perfect. And when you fail or you miss something, don't beat yourself up for it. Just pick up and continue. Because it will work. And that's why I say plan to fail. Because if you don't, when you fail, too many people have a tendency to quit. Consistency does not mean that you're perfect. It just means you continue. The reason so many of us are inconsistent is because we have that mindset of all or nothing. And because of time, I'm going to skip down to the final part, is fall in love with the process. Fall in love with the process. Because too many of us, we put our goal, we put our ambition, we put all of our energy, we put all of our focus on the final goal. We put it on the goal, we put it on the destination. But very rare do you stay at that goal or destination really long, because by the time you get there, you typically have made another goal, right? You typically have set another plan or another objective. So fall in love with the process, because your time is not spent just at a single destination. The majority of your time is spent in the journey. And if you can't fall in love with the process and the journey, you're going to be miserable. And when you're miserable, guess what happens? You're not consistent. Because no one likes to stay miserable. But if you fall in love with the process, I'll give you a personal example. I'm a musician. I'm a drummer. I play guitar a little bit. I play a little bit of keys, but my primary instrument is drums. I've played it my whole life since I was able to pick something up with my hands and bang on pots and pans. My poor mother. But when I was in my early teens and I started to really want to really play, I had other friends around me that were just naturally talented. I mean, they just touch an instrument and almost by osmosis just knew how to play it. And I played and I was getting better and I was working at it. But it's like they sat down on a drum set and just like started doing all this stuff. I'm like, how in the world are you doing that? But I kept working at it. I wasn't the best and I was not the most talented. I was not the most natural talented drummer. However, I didn't quit. I was consistent. But the thing that made me consistent in it is I fell in love with the process. I started to like and enjoy practicing. I'd sit down at the drum set and just work on a rudiment or work on a particular thing. I'd just sit there for an hour or two, just and just try to speed it up and just kept trying to get faster and faster. And this simple little thing. And because of that, gradually, I surpassed them in my skill. I surpassed them in how I could play and what I could do. I ended up touring the U.S. and Europe playing drums. I've done studio work. I've done all kinds of stuff in that aspect with drums. But I surpassed them not because I was the best, but because I fell in love with the process. And because I fell in love with the process, I was consistent. If you don't fall in love with the process, let me put it this way. Fall in love with the process of the relationship with God. Fall in love with that prayer time. Fall in love with opening the Bible and gleaning and learning something new and letting God bring revelation to you. Not necessarily the pastor giving you revelation, but you getting revelation from God. Fall in love with that process. Fall in love with the process of making your wife happy. Like bringing her some calzone. But you fall in love with that process and it makes that journey simple. And it makes it simple to be consistent. Because consistency impacts everything in your life. Now, like Brian, he's a great videographer. And I'm sure he didn't become a great videographer just because he woke up one day and says, I want to do this. He fell in love with doing videography. Sometimes he might not love it. But he fell in love with the process of what it was and what he was doing. And then became great at it because he was consistent. You have to fall in love with the process. So, you have to have a why. Because if you don't have a why, you'll stop. Brian's why was probably he wanted to be able to pay his bills. Wanted to be able to take care of family. Wanted to be able to do, but didn't want to have to go punch a clock 9 to 5 with someone. So he says, I'm going to do this. And I'm making this up. I'm not trying to put his own why in him. But he had a why that made him keep doing it even when it didn't feel like it was going well. And guess what? I'm sure you've had some failures.
Yes.
And I'm sure you learned that sometimes things fail and you plan for it. You know what? The mic wasn't working. He had another battery. He had planned, whether he was thinking of it in that way or not, he had planned, through experience if nothing else, he had planned for there to be a failure. But he fell in love with the why, therefore he the process, therefore he continues to do it.
And I fixed the failure quickly.
Yes, he did, because you planned for it. And he didn't have to run around. Does anybody have a AAA battery? Do you have a AAA battery? Do you have No, he was already prepared. Because he had planned for it. So in life, but really, with your spiritual walk with God, you've got to have a why. You need to know what it is. If you're like, I really don't know my why, spend the next week saying, what is my why? What will motivate me to do this even when I don't feel like it? I know some people's like, what motivates me, my why is because I've done it without it, and I proved I can't, and it doesn't work. I've messed everything up. So with God, I need Him, because without Him, I have a tendency of messing everything up. So I don't want to mess everything up. I need that in my life. Others may not be. Everyone's why is different, but know your why. Plan to fail. And fall in love with the process. And if you do that, you will find your consistency in your life becomes so much stronger. Your relationships become better. Your walk with God becomes greater. Your careers, just everything in life begins to improve when you're consistent in the things you know you need to be.
Thank you.
Yep.